This podcast is brought to you by Refine Recovery. If you're struggling, whether it's mental health, substance abuse, give us a call. We can definitely help you out. Give me a ring at the number below and you can talk to me personally and, we'll get you some help. Welcome everyone to episode 4 of the Recovery Refine podcast. Today we have an awesome guest who has been pivotal in my recovery journey, Yeshaia Blakeney. Yeshaia, tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you, man?
I'm a dad.
Mm-hmm.
I've worked in recovery a long time. I'm in recovery. I have basically spent my entire life working one way or another on the front line of treatment. So
Mm-hmm.
people who have mental health issues and substance abuse issues. It's been 22 years. So
And how long have you been sober now?
23 years.
Okay, so
Well, 23 years and 2 days.
right into the industry
Yeah.
from getting sober.
Yeah,
And you're originally from the Bay Area too, right?
Yeah, I'm from the A area.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about what it was like growing up in the Bay Area.
It was probably the last good generation, man. I don't know, man. I didn't, think it was that dope at the time, but considering what's happening now, it felt pretty good.
Mhm.
The Bay's an interesting place. The Bay, I was from Oakland and Berkeley, and the Bay Area was kind of the heart of the civil rights movement
Mhm.
and the hippie movement. There was the East Coast and West Coast. On the West Coast, it was the Bay Area. And so, my parents in that generation were the baby boomers that were attempting to change the world.
Mhm.
And I said, I was born into the generation where the revolution succeeded and failed,
Mm.
which is kind of weird.
Yeah.
Like the feminist movement had a lot of successes. The civil rights movement obviously had a lot of successes, but, capitalism and, bourgeois values
Mhm.
and tech and, everything else kind of came in. And so it was sort of like we had, those of us I was born in 81. We were born in that generation. We had a spirit of kind of revolution,
Mhm.
but things were too complex to know where to put your energy.
Yeah.
And your parents didn't really know because you'd already changed most of the laws. The parents didn't know what to tell you to fight for exactly.
But you still had that that
but it's
angst
still
in
like,
you,
it's like Tupac,
Yeah. Yeah.
Tupac was, I'm like, and I'm a little younger than Tupac,
Mhm.
but he was like that, right? His parents were Panthers and, stuff like that. And he had a big fire, but he didn't exactly know what to do with it. You know what I mean?
For
Was he
sure.
a gangster? Was he,
And your parents kind of grew up summer of love era, right? Like,
Yeah, I mean, my parents were born in the 40s. So, they came up in the 60s and 70s. You
Mhm.
know what I mean?
Yeah, tell us a little bit about your parents. I know that your family has a tie to recovery.
Yeah, sure, sure, sure. I'm Black and Jewish. And
Mhm.
so at the time, that was somewhat unique. It's still somewhat unique coming from a biracial family. I also came from a family where, half of my family had some money and half of my family is really poor.
Mhm.
So there was a lot of dichotomies in my life, like just different cultures.
Mhm.
And so a lot of my life has been kind of reconciling, the different inputs
Mhm.
that I have, as is the case with all of us.
Mhm.
Um, but both my parents were psychologists, but they weren't, private practice clinical psychologists. They got psychology degrees to figure out what would be the appropriate methods to help change the world.
Mhm.
And they wanted to understand people, both through a social lens and an individual lens, so that they could design systems and ways to create, large scale change.
Mhm.
So I said I grew up with kind of revolutionary parents. My parents knew the Panthers. My mother started one of the first Black student unions in the country at Cal Berkeley.
As a white Jew too, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
she passed. So my
Okay.
mom used to have an afro,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
so she would pass as Black.
Yeah.
But yeah, they did kick her out
Mhm.
eventually. She started and they kicked her
They were
out.
like, "We can't do this anymore." Or,
Uh-huh.
yeah.
Yeah, and my parents were involved in a lot of political activism,
Mhm.
and they actually ended up eventually working, at the White House. They worked for Governor Reagan, and they worked at the White House under Reagan when he was president when I was growing up in the '80s. So about every couple weeks, they'll fly to Washington when I was growing up, and they
Was
were
that a
working on
trip,
policy stuff.
like, being a kid, knowing that your parents kinda have a seat at the table, or
When you're a kid,
D
it's all
Yeah.
it's like you don't have another thing to compare it to. But I do remember I met Reagan, I flew to Washington one time. I remember I was in some hall and there's like, "This is Ronald Reagan." Okay, whatever.
That's gotta be a trip as a kid,
I
right?
mean, whatever.
Were you old enough that you were using at that point or, like,
No,
young,
no, no.
young?
I was a
Yeah, yeah.
kid. I was a kid. This was like 5 years old.
When did, like, the substance abuse, the issues kinda start to present for you?
I grew up in an alcoholic household. So
Mhm.
wow. My dad has 13 brothers and sisters.
Mhm.
Okay,
Wow.
2 of them don't use drugs and alcohol. My dad, who's now in recovery, and his oldest sister, they're also, almost all of them are dead except for those
Mhm.
two. So there was a tremendous amount of addiction on my father's side of the family. And, I have hundreds of cousins.
Mhm.
And then on my mom's side, my grandfather was an alcoholic. So I grew up in a party house. I mean, I grew up music, dancing,
Kickback,
alcohol,
yeah.
weed. I grew up
Did you
I grew up in a
know
party
it
house.
was alcoholism at the time, or was it just kind of the way of life?
um, my mom, I was probably 12 or something like that, and my mom came to me and and told me that my dad was an alcoholic. Yeah, she was like, "Your dad's an alcoholic." It's like she wanted me to contextualize and understand
Mhm.
what was going on because my dad would pick me up from my friend's house, for instance, and he would be driving like 2 miles an hour
Mhm.
with his, like, face against the windshield, and he would turn on the wrong street,
Mhm.
and he couldn't really function,
Yeah.
and he would basically stop at the bar every time
Mhm.
on his way home. He'd stop at this bar, Nick's Bar in Oakland, and so by the time he got home, he was drunk,
Mhm.
and so I think she wanted to be able to explain to me why my father was like a non-functional person.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So she told me he's alcoholic. She took me to an Alateen meeting or Al-Anon
Mhm.
meeting, which I remember because it was just so bizarre, as a teenager. So it
Yeah.
was like, "Hi, Bob," or whatever the
Mhm.
fuck it was, and I was like, "What is going on?" Um, and I don't know, it's interesting to think about being a young kid who's given that information but doesn't have a lot of life experience to contextualize the impact of that and kinda what that means. And so for me, yeah, I think I just didn't know what to do with it. I was more
Mhm.
interested in kid things. I was more interested in doing what I wanted to do. I kind of, wanted to make sure my dad was healthy, but you're a kid. You're like
For sure.
interested in other things. You know what I mean?
I can completely relate too. Like, very similar kind of story, same but different,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Mhm.
my mother's Jewish, her family's
Uh-huh.
wealthy. My father is from like a farming town in southern Missouri. His family's Baptist, grew up dirt poor in basically like a one-bedroom house, right?
Yeah.
And my father is also an alcoholic. So I remember the
Yeah.
moment where I kind of had that realization of like something's different with dad.
Yeah.
And it was after my bar mitzvah, and we're driving home, and it's a party. Everybody's drinking,
Sure.
and it's celebration, and I noticed he's driving on the wrong side of the road,
Uh-huh.
and I'm
Yeah.
like,
That's
Dad, like,
exactly
what's
like
going,
exactly what it
what's
is.
going on? But I think you put it beautifully that like I just wanted to do kid things.
Mhm.
I didn't know what that
Yeah,
meant.
and kids aren't particularly interested in their parents. I mean, I have 4 of them.
Yeah,
They're not that interested in me, you know what I
definitely
mean?
not when you're 13 years old. I wanted to do hood rat shit with my hood rat
Yeah.
friends.
Maybe if your dad's like Kanye West or something, you have an interest,
Yeah,
but if you have
yeah.
ordinary parents, I don't think you have an interest.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
it was interesting for me though watching the progression of noticing when it started to become like a real
Yeah.
problem. And then now when I think back about my journey, it's like there are a lot of similarities there.
Uh-huh.
Like what from the fun to fun with problems to just straight problems. Like I
Yeah.
had a similar progression and ascension in
Yeah, sure.
addiction.
Yeah, yeah.
How did that kind of look like for you? When did the fun like smoking weed translate to fun with problems into just straight problems?
I mean, pretty quick.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean? If I think about it,
Mhm.
I found my dad's stash. I was like probably 11.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so I started smoking weed at like 11, taking mushrooms, smoking weed.
Taking
Yeah.
mushrooms at 11?
Oh, yeah. But I was in Prince Berkeley.
Early rising. Yeah, I guess
Berkeley,
Berkeley's
man. There
different. It's
was
like
dude, I
decriminalized
don't want
there
to go into
now, and
this, but
yeah.
these I don't know if these guys are still alive. I would be shocked if they're still
Yeah.
alive. But there are these two twins, Nick and Jay,
Okay.
that lived at Berkeley that were the hoodest kids you ever met in your life, dude. I mean, they were such street rats. And looking back, like that's why the first time I did mushrooms was theirs. But looking back when I remember the mushrooms they gave me, I think they were kitchen mushrooms, like, like whatever, the regular mushrooms,
Like a
like a
reishi or like
champignon
yeah,
or whatever.
yeah,
I don't know what
yeah.
they're called. Just
They weren't
the
psilocybin
most regular
mushrooms. Yeah,
mushrooms
yeah.
you can think of, but they must have had LSD on them, bro.
Mhm.
They
Oh, so they
must have. Oh, they
dosed
worked
them.
so well,
Yeah,
bro.
yeah.
I was the fucking Nick and Jay, bro. You
Yeah.
couldn't trust those guys at all, man.
Yeah.
Um, so and then I started selling weed,
Mhm.
like in 6th or 7th grade.
It's usually how it goes
So for
too.
me, it was just like I was just kind of like, I don't know, the
Mhm.
door was open, I just jumped right through it. Um, so yeah, problems showed up real quickly. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Real quickly. Like I stopped participating in school. The Bay Area at that time was a pretty hectic place. You know what I mean? I mean, still can be.
Mhm.
But the Bay Area, like I said, there was a lot of people that had a lot of energy. There was a lot of jacking, a lot of robbing. It's not a gang city, and so it's not organized in some ways. It was pretty chaotic
Mhm.
growing up in the Bay Area as a brown male. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? And I was biracial, so it was like figuring out how to navigate that. So it was pretty hectic, pretty quick. And then at 15 years old, I actually had a very similar story to the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. It just is.
Shouts to Will Smith, you know?
It's
Yeah,
just what
yeah,
it
yeah,
is. I mean, dude, I saw him rapping.
yeah.
He had like a comeback album.
Oh, no, the only Will Smith work I remember is, like, the Welcome to
You're
Miami.
too
Yeah,
young. You're
yeah,
too
yeah,
young.
yeah.
But he was a mainstream rapper for a
Mhm.
minute when I was a kid. But he came back
Okay.
recently. It's the most pathetic thing I've ever
It's
seen.
not good.
Oh
It's
my
not good.
god! I was like,
Yeah, I
if I
mean,
ever try to make a comeback, I was like, just John, stop me.
yeah,
Like, I
yeah,
don't want to be that guy.
well, we might have to talk about a comeback, but Will
I
Smith right
mean,
now, not in the best
it
position to be
was
doing a rap
it
album, you
wasn't.
know?
I
Yeah.
was like, wow, this is rough, man. That's rough to watch. But anyways, I threw a party at my house, and it was like a riot
Mhm,
basically. And people were pulling guns, and it got super hectic. And my mom was out of town, and my dad had been smoking crack. My dad had been gone
mhm.
for months, and she came back and sent me to live with my uncle in Beverly Hills.
So that is
It was
pretty,
like,
yeah,
I'll
yeah.
tell you, it's exact.
Not Bel Air, but Beverly
The
Hills.
Fresh Prince of Beverly Hills
Yeah,
when I
I
showed
love
up,
that,
and I
yeah.
showed up like back then we used to wear Nautica, so
Mhm.
I showed up my Nautica jacket and my hat, and I was from the Bay, and
Ready to
like,
go, you had
you know what I mean?
arrived,
I
yeah.
was like, "Wee woo," you know, and it made a lot of trouble. You
Mhm.
know, man, it made a lot of trouble in Beverly
So you
Hills.
hit the ground running when you came to
Well, not
LA.
exactly. I was actually living in my uncle's maid's quarters.
Okay.
You know, my uncle had a house, in Beverly Hills
Mhm.
on my mom's side, and I lived in the maid's room, next to the kitchen, and when I first got there, I was 15, I was like, "I'm gonna get my shit together."
Mhm.
Because even when you're a teenager, if you have any good influences, and I had plenty, you know when you're off track, and so in the
Mhm.
back of your mind, you're kinda haunted. Now, if you just grew up around chaos, you don't might not have that great a point of reference, but I
Mhm.
had some point of reference as to what it meant to, be a decent human being and
Yeah.
live well and make healthy choices, you know? I mean, I had a lot of chaos, but I also had, a lot of good. Um, so that was like the first time I was like, "I'm gonna try to get my act together." But you have no skills. You
Mhm.
have no skills, you have no ability, you're not open,
No way to
so
implement
you have
that.
no I
Yeah,
had
yeah.
no meta awareness. I mean,
Mhm.
I didn't know what was going on. And so as soon as I bumped into people, it was done, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I started running around again, um, and just getting loaded. But I really don't love telling my story. Who cares? I started getting loaded. I went to rehab when I was
Yeah.
17. I kept getting loaded. You know, I was on automatic pilot.
Mhm.
Eventually, I got arrested, I got arrested quite a few times, but ultimately got arrested for trafficking and possession with intent to sell. I was facing 4 years in prison, and I went to treatment at 21 years old to, as I said at the time, get my shit together.
Mhm.
Um, you know
When you went into treatment, did you have any inclination that you might be somebody who worked in treatment for the next 22 years,
No,
or?
no desire.
Okay.
No, oh, well, yeah, no desire, I mean, just no, it wasn't an interest of mine at all.
Mhm.
At all. I think, when you get loaded like that, I think, at least for me, there wasn't a lot of vision in my life. I was a
Yeah.
rapper, so I was doing music. That was the thing that felt real and good to me
Mhm.
was, that outlet. And I love words, and I love language, and I love thinking and art.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was my thing.
Well, it's interesting too, like, hearing you say that, like, when we're in addiction, we kind of live our life one day at a time, right? And then there's, like, this.
One night at a
Yeah,
time,
one
maybe.
night at a time, an hour at a time, maybe a second at a time,
Mhm.
and then we get sober and we have to, like, do that same thing, but then we start, like, we got shit to do, right? Like, there's a shift that happened with me, like, where I didn't have a vision to, like, go to college when I was getting loaded the
Sure.
first time I went to treatment, what career I wanted to work in or anything.
Sure.
But as soon as I get sober,
Yeah.
when I'm 29, I'm like,
Yeah.
I gotta have a vision,
Yeah.
right? And really what they teach you in, like, any type of program is you gotta
Yeah.
take the shit one day at a time.
Yeah.
So there's, like, a split that happens, you know?
Yeah. It makes me think early on in my counseling career, I started to have like a certain amount of respect for the parts of us that didn't get sober.
Mhm.
And I used to say to people, it's like, the part of us that didn't get sober, like if we take it seriously, if I don't think it's just an idiot, because getting loaded can be stupid.
Yeah.
Let's be honest,
Mhm.
right? I mean, and worse,
Yeah.
stupid. But if we take our part seriously,
Mhm.
I mean, it's okay. This part that like went to rehab and didn't get clean. This part that had many opportunities to get their act together and didn't. And if we like really steel man that part, you know, why? What's their claim?
Mhm.
What's the claim of the addict part of us that, will not get clean? And for me, I realized it was some part of me that knew that to get sober meant to join this fucked up world of responsibility.
Yeah.
Like,
Mhm.
and you have these thoughts as kids. I think so. I mean, if you're thinking, where you're like, oh, this is what, like, I'm going to grow up. I'm going to show up to something I kind of like or don't like at all every day. I'm going to get married. I'm going to, like, you kind of
Mhm.
like, you look at this thing, this life thing, this world thing, this civilization thing. At least I did.
Mhm.
And I was like, what, that?
Fuck
I
that.
was like,
Yeah.
I don't want to do that. Like, that
Yeah.
doesn't seem, and you're not crazy as a kid.
Mm-mm.
You know what I mean? You just don't think deeply about your options.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure.
you know?
I think some people do, and those are the ones who they go to college, they get a master's degree at like 24,
Yeah.
26 years old, and they just like take their life off. But I didn't have that awareness when I was a
But
kid.
even there, who cares? Take your life off in what? You go travel a lot and go
Y-
see everything. I mean, take your life off in
Yeah.
what?
I guess like people who, from my own perception, people who have that sort of plan, their life kind of gets very small instead of big. And I always wanted like this big life, and I didn't want to be locked down by anything.
Well, big lives lock you down. So
Yeah.
there's a contradiction there.
Yeah, for
Wouldn't you
sure.
agree?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I can, as my life has gotten bigger in sobriety, I definitely feel more locked
It's
down.
totally.
But it's like I think I wanted this false sense of freedom. Like I don't want to be accountable to anything.
When you were
I
getting
just,
loaded.
Yeah, when I was getting
Yeah, there's a
loaded.
strong value of freedom.
And I think even when I first got sober, that's what I still wanted. I wanted to mesh those two worlds. And then I quickly realized that like if I want the things in my life that I think are going to give me freedom, like I'm going to be locked down, which is like a weird thing to go through
Yeah.
when you've got like 60 days sober,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, freedom's tricky.
Yeah, freedom isn't free.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, it's there's what I say, freedom from and freedom to.
Mm.
In the the Exodus story is interesting, right? Like they get freed from Egypt,
Mhm.
but they're in the desert.
Mhm.
And that's kind of like the archetype. It's like, oh, I want to get free, and you get free. It's like, okay, now what?
Yeah, and
Okay,
you're
now we're free.
trapped. There's
Now what?
nothing.
In the
Yeah.
fucking desert. Oh, cool, man.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so you talked a little bit about parts, right? Like I remember when I was working with you. So I went to Yeshaia's program, and
I can neither confirm or deny.
Yeah, but I can confirm. And it changed my life. And part of the foundation I built in sobriety and in therapy, which I still continue to do today, was in parts work.
Mhm.
So could you describe like what IFS and parts work is?
Yeah. It's actually quite a natural framework. I think
Mhm.
it's something that humans naturally make sense of, but we don't think about it.
Mhm.
But often, for instance, somebody might say, I'm in conflict.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, what does it mean to be in conflict? What does it mean to be in conflict?
I feel like there's a division,
Yeah.
whether it's me and another person or a division in myself, right?
I would even say if you're in conflict with another person, but you're in conflict, you're still the one in conflict,
Mhm.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
there's another person involved in the conflict, but you're in conflict in relationship to that person.
Yeah, if you take
right?
the other person away, I'm
Any
still in conflict.
So
Yeah.
definitionally, what does it mean to be in conflict?
Mhm.
Just as a human, what does it mean to be in conflict?
I guess at odds,
Yeah, with what?
at odds with yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So in order to be at odds with yourself, there would have to be some sort of split,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Between, you and some other part of
Mhm.
yourself. And so I think parts work is really natural,
Mhm.
but we don't take it as seriously, or we're not necessarily aware of it. And so parts work has taken that idea and that I would say reality
Mhm.
actually, and has created a category system that is gracious
Mhm.
to understand and get to know and explore the various parts of you.
Mhm.
It can become a little technical in terms of how they think about parts. And so like if you're, oh, how would you define a part? It's like, okay, it's kind of like a sub-autonomous part of the self with an agenda and a history
Mhm.
that is somewhat connected to the constellation of parts in you, but is also semi-autonomous, which is kind of interesting. Like,
Mhm.
so that becomes interesting, like um, dissociative identity disorder, or multiple personality disorder, which most people have heard of because it's kind of
Mhm.
a rare and strange disorder, as a disorder where I have different people living inside of me, but each person living inside of me has amnesia. So I
So
kind of
they can't remember
It's
the
like
other
there is. I
person.
just
Yeah.
wake up
Yeah.
and I'm shy,
Mhm.
and now I'm Sandy, and
Mhm.
now I'm right. I mean, that's a real condition, just
Mhm.
usually from trauma, fragmentation. And so I think the probably the largest evidence for IFS and other parts work, Gestalt, et cetera,
Mhm.
is dissociative identity disorder. If we think about, dissociative identity disorder is parts with amnesia, all of us actually have parts, we just don't have amnesia.
But we can remember when the parts come
100%.
online. Yeah, yeah.
100%. And it gets kind of spiritual and kooky. I mean, if you really get deep into IFS work, sometimes you discover parts that, are of different genders,
Mhm.
have kind of different histories. Like not all of the things you discover, in your psyche or your imaginal world are what you would expect. So
Mhm.
it can get pretty deep and interesting.
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know?
that was my experience. I mean, I remember working with you and my therapist with going into parts work in relation to my adoption, right?
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
And which was a trip, right? And I was one of those people who I didn't think that I had any trauma when I got
Oh
sober,
my God.
which is like such a dumb thing looking back now. Everybody has trauma, but I think it was like this male bravado
And
in me that
definitional to trauma, by the way.
yeah, to not identify with having trauma
Yeah,
or
of
yeah,
course.
and I pushed that part down and when I got sober, all of that shit came back online,
Mhm.
like, very quickly, and doing the parts work, it helped me make sense of that young boy that
Yeah,
felt
sure,
abandoned,
sure.
and I felt like I was being seen and heard in a different
Yeah.
way, and it took some pulling too,
Yeah,
it
yeah.
wasn't something that I was, like, willing to do
Of
at
course.
first,
Yeah.
but, yeah, it was interesting how the relief I got from I was a person filled with shame and guilt,
Yeah.
as we all are when we
Sure.
get sober. I
Yeah.
think human beings, whether you struggle with addiction or not, I mean, you're the shame and guilt guy, so we all struggle with shame and guilt, and I didn't know how to make sense of that. And
Mhm.
when I could tie it back to these younger parts of me that were seeking something or coming online to protect me in different ways,
Yeah.
it all kind of clicked and made sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just thinking when you were talking, there was just a moment probably 50 seconds ago where I
Mhm.
sort of saw you. And the thought I had as I was looking at you is like it's one of your best qualities. Like I think, my experience of knowing you is that quality of innocence, um, and even the part of you that got hurt in
Mhm.
your innocence. But when I would experience a flash of that, it was such a beautiful part of who you are. You
Mhm.
know what I mean?
Thank you. Yeah.
Um, and so even just getting to witness that 50 seconds ago, just for a millisecond,
Yeah,
it was like a nice breath of fresh air for me. Like, oh yeah, there it is, something real.
I remember coming in, like, I was always there early every single morning, and you would be there early every morning. And you would, like, catch my eyes walking
Yeah,
across when we were gonna sit down and do community group. You'd
yeah,
be like, "John, how you doing?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm fine, man. Things are
yeah,
good." And you're
yeah.
like, "Now, how are you really doing?"
Oh
And it's
god,
like your
terrible.
eyes were following me across.
Yeah,
But you were right. You could sense that there was, like, a more raw and real part of me. And I think my defense mechanism, not just in addiction, but, like,
yeah,
in life, is to
yeah,
present as everything fine.
yeah,
Everything's fine. And when that wall gets chipped down a little bit, usually by another human being,
yeah,
I can come online, and it's like
yeah,
almost like I'm safe,
yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, you had a lot of beautiful moments. It's interesting. I'm just thinking this now as you're talking, but I think one of the beautiful experiences I have in this life is I'm always in pain,
Mhm.
you know, but not so much pain that I can't function and show up for the people in my life, but enough pain that is very difficult for me to be performative
Mhm.
over long periods of time, or to lack empathy
Mhm.
for long periods of time because life has never felt easy to me. I've always had a suicidal part. I've always had existential, challenges. I've always had trauma. I've healed a lot. I feel like a solid, relatively solid human as
Mhm.
humans come. But I've always had pain and suffering in my life, just internally and care and love. And so that's a real blessing because it allows me to be like, come on, man. Like when people come in or they make life about something trivial or shallow, or they're trying to sell me something, trying to sell themselves something, because I know life hurts.
Mhm.
Yeah, I know what it's like to be a human being, and I don't care who the fuck you are, dude. I know what it's like to be a human being. It's hard and it
Mhm.
hurts, and it's not easy for anybody. And so because of that, because that's my experience, I get to be like, come on, bro. Like that's what I'm just like, come on, dog. You know what
For
I
sure.
mean?
It's like
Not
you
because
could
of
yeah.
you, but it's because you're a human,
Yeah, and
and
it's like
because of
a
me,
you can see through that because you can see it in yourself, right? Like those parts of you that come online whenever you're trying to mask or protect, right?
Yeah, man. Yeah.
It's a trip. Like when you just said that, like I was thinking back to my own experience and how I show up today, even with like a few years sober.
Yeah.
And I resonate when you say like I'm in pain all the time,
Yeah.
because I do feel like I'm in pain all the time. But I feel like I can't let
Yeah.
anybody else see that pain. Like I have to show up for people and do
Yeah.
this. And I think that's a little bit of the 12-step programming that is like I've taken to an extreme
Yeah.
towards like suit up, show up, be okay. You know,
Yeah.
you're fine. Things could be worse.
Yeah.
When in reality, sometimes it's okay to just be like,
Yeah.
I'm in pain right now, but
Yeah.
I don't know how to express that,
It made
you
me
know?
think of my mother's father,
Mhm.
who was a very, he's a tough man. I mean, in a really good way. He's like Sean Connery or something,
Mhm.
like he was just this
Stoic and
deep
yeah.
voice and just spoke very slowly. He was like a king.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? He
Mhm.
really was a deep dude. And this was his chain, and he used to rock this. He had a big gold chain,
Yeah.
and didn't graduate high school, but he became very successful. And he was just very deliberate, very conscientious, old school guy. And when my grandmother died, oh man, I was standing with him by the fireplace. And he had been with her since he was 13 and she was 12 from
Mm.
a game of spin the bottle, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
now he's 90
The
or
old
whatever.
days.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's 80
Mhm.
years, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's deep shit, 80 fucking years, John, with
Mhm.
somebody,
It's
and then they
crazy.
die,
Yeah.
and he's standing near the fireplace, and he just broke. I mean, just cracked.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? It was like, "Whoa." And I just remember him saying, "I always thought I was a strong man."
Mm.
And it really, like, it's like, "Whoa." Like, he didn't think he could crack.
Mhm.
I always thought I was a strong man, and he cracked, you know what I mean? Now, interesting, his definition, obviously, he had been living in a reality where his definition of a strong man is somebody who never cracks,
Mhm.
right? That was his for in 90 years, that was the world he lived in. That's not how I was, you know what I mean? That's
Yeah.
the generation we were raised in.
Mhm.
Um, and so, I think much of life and who we are and striving for integrity, recover integrity,
Mhm.
right, is the tension between my performative false self and my soul,
Mm.
right? And
Yeah.
other than maybe the Buddha or Jesus or Rabbi Kiva, or, I
Mhm.
mean, these people I never met, I think for us human beings, it's the tension of that,
Mhm.
right? And so there's a desire to get rid of the false self, to get rid of the performative self, but the performative self develops, psychologically as a way to deal with our social environment.
Mm.
How do human beings deal with the fact that other human beings look at us and see us, but don't see us?
Mm.
That's a very interesting situation, right? I
Yeah.
see you, I can see you, but I can't see you, not fully, not like you see you.
Mhm.
So human beings are both exposed and hidden. And how does a human being tolerate being exposed and being hidden? And we're, as far as I know, the only creatures that are like that in a significant social way, at least on this planet. And so we develop a self to be seen
Yeah.
and a private self that's ours. And we spend our lives, trying to build bridges between our private self and the self that's seen.
That's interesting because it's like the classic example of stuff I've said to ex-girlfriends in fights, and my parents says, "You don't understand me,"
Yeah, yeah.
which is really, "You don't see me."
Huge. Yeah, it's huge. Yeah.
And
Yeah, huge.
I think you hit the nail on the head with, like, our society kind of molds how we present, right? Because my family was the type of family where men don't show emotions, we definitely don't talk about it, like, just be okay, mask all of that, and just,
Yeah.
like, go do the next thing.
Yeah.
Which was I remember working with you, which was tough when I was newly sober because I was emotionally raw,
You
and
were
I
so good.
I had, like, all of this stuff I wanted to be seen,
Yeah.
finally, I wanted to
Yeah.
be understood,
Yeah.
but I couldn't bring that to the surface naturally.
Yeah.
Like, I remember sitting in a group with you and Adam one day, and we're in community group and we're going around,
Yeah.
and you guys just honed in on me that
I
I was in
remember.
pain,
I remember.
and I think the goal of the group was to get me to either yell or cry, and I did both, but it was like a
Oh, that's
cathartic
good.
experience where, like, for the first time in my adult life,
Yeah.
I felt truly vulnerable as a
Yeah.
man and as a human being,
Yeah.
and it gave me this release of, like, you
Yeah.
don't have to let it build up to this jumping off point,
Yeah.
or, like, you can just incorporate that in your day-to-day
Was it
life.
lo was it loving? I mean,
It was
no, I
100%
mean,
loving.
let's slow down. Don't give me the I
Yeah.
mean, you didn't have another treatment experience similar to the one you did at Recover and Take. So I actually like you to think about it.
Mhm.
When you think about that moment, because I remember it,
Mhm.
were there elements of it you think that could have been more skillful or would have benefited you more?
No, I think it happened the way it needed to happen.
Okay.
Like it gave me an experience and yeah, it was loving, which was a trip
Mhm.
because my experience with people trying to pull things out of me
Yeah.
felt manipulative.
Yeah, sure.
And this was like, hey, you have a forum. We want to see you.
Yeah.
Like what's going on with you, which was something that I had never experienced
Yeah.
until I came to Recover Integrity.
Mhm.
And I think that's something that your program does beautifully
Good try.
is you create this, it's like a tribe is how I felt. Like everybody plays their part in one way or
Mhm.
another, especially in that community group, right?
Yeah.
Like you've got somebody who feels like they're an outcast. You've got
Mhm.
like the leaders of the tribe, you and
Yeah.
Adam, who are kind of like creating the
Got the
song and dance.
scapegoat. You
Yeah,
got the whole
you
thing.
got
You got
everything,
oh,
as
man,
a,
yeah.
and yeah, the way that happened is because everybody played their part. I was
Yeah.
able to look around in the room and feel safe and feel loved
Yeah.
by these people I had known for
Yeah.
30 days. Like, how does that happen?
I remember I'm not exactly sure if it was that group because we obviously had, more than one encounter.
Yeah.
But, as you were saying it, I remember wanting you to know that it was okay to get angry,
Hmm. I remember. Yeah.
Like, people don't recognize, a lot of people don't recognize that anger is a natural and beautiful response to injustice,
Hmm.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's what anger is, right? Now, anger can be misappropriated and blah, 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 blah,
Hmm.
blah. It can become a pattern. It can become, pathological. But anger in its natural form is a response to injustice. If I see homeless people on the street and I get angry, you know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
Somebody violates a boundary of mine, I get angry. It's because something unjust is happening, right? I mean, in its natural state.
Hmm.
And, addicts often, like many people, because anger is an emotion that most people don't like to be around,
Hmm.
they repress their anger or they introject their anger into themselves and they have negative self-talk or they narcissistically bypass their introjected anger. You know what I mean? And so learning like it's okay to fucking be angry, dude.
Yeah.
It's okay to be angry. Like to me, that's a really a huge thing. And in AA is so brilliant in so many ways. I
Hmm.
mean, I just think the wisdom of AA, I could talk about it for 3 hours. You
Hmm.
know what I mean? Easy. But there's a couple of areas I think based on, the historical context in which it developed, that I think it lacks.
Hmm.
Psychological sophistication. One of them is around the difference between resentment and righteous anger.
Hmm.
And there are differences, like resentment comes out of Nietzsche and Kierkegaard, and resentment has to do with actually distorting reality
Hmm.
and holding anger as a psychological defense. And
And
so
that's why we look at our part in the
A
resentment.
is
Yeah. Yeah.
brilliant with
Hmm.
resentment and it understands that that distortion is keeping us stuck, right? Like a 25-year-old kid that's blaming his parents for their imperfection. I always say like, human beings, when they're not stable, they need an enemy,
Mm. True. Yeah.
right? That's why the internet is full of, are you for me or against me,
Hmm.
right? The type of stuff. You need an enemy. When society gets unstable, you need a scapegoat. You need an enemy.
Yeah. Like Batman needs his
So
Joker.
resentment is a psychological form of projection where I'm projecting onto something so that I can have an enemy, so that I can stabilize myself and feel safe and okay because I can know I'm good and you're bad,
Hmm.
or I'm weak and you're strong, or I'm, however that goes, that
Yeah.
binary logic, or I'm prey, you're predator, I'm predator, you're prey, however that
Hmm.
works, right? So it's brilliant with resentment, but there are types of anger that aren't resentment.
Yeah. And in
You
the
know what I
book,
mean?
it says we had to be free of anger,
Yeah.
which is like an interesting
They don't
thing.
there's
Like,
not there's a distinction that's
hmm.
necessary there. It's
Yeah.
not healthy. It's why you'll get people 20 years sober who are repressed and depressed. It's why you
Mhm.
get, some of the suicide. And the other area where AA, could have learned from psychoanalysis if they had followed Freud and not Jung a little more, was in grieving.
Mm.
There's no grief inventory.
There's not, which is grief is a huge part of why I was using. Yeah.
Grief is the exit from anger.
Mhm. Mm.
Okay? Right? Like,
Describe that a little bit more. Yeah, that's interesting.
well, there's a question about so something unjust happens.
Mhm.
Somebody harms me. And it really impacts me. I mean, it changed my life. Let's say something like that. And I hold a resentment deeply, right? I had an alcoholic dad who left at 11 years old and it fucked my life up, man,
Mhm.
and it hurt. I was wounded. And I hold a deep resentment, maybe against men, maybe against my father, maybe against God, whatever. Ultimately, I can look at my part. I can take responsibility, right? I could go through an amends, I can do all of that stuff in 12 step. But what about the loss? What about the fact that I got hurt and lost 10 years because of something that happened to me?
Mm.
What do I do with that? What do I do with the loss? Right?
It's interesting. We're
You know
we're
what I'm
told to
saying?
just let go of
Yeah.
this
Yeah,
resentment, right?
and what they mean is grieve,
Mhm.
but they don't have a specific procedure or container for grief. They don't think about it, and I think it's because, the program and like I said, they followed certain thinkers and not others. It's kind of a Christian program in some ways. It was, like, a strong Christian influence, Oxford group, but also you think about the founders. They probably were, a little neurotic in their taking of responsibility because they probably felt so guilty for being alcoholics. The idea that they had a need for something like grief was probably kind of an anathema to them
Mm.
because they probably thought of themselves as bad guys, right?
Mm.
I don't mean bad guys, but you know
Yeah,
what I mean?
yeah, for
Like, they were
sure.
the perpetrators,
Mhm.
right? So if you think about AA, it does have some of that tinge. "Hey, we were the perpetrators, and we need to take responsibility." Don't be too hard on yourself because they know that you relapse if you're too hard on
Mhm.
yourself. But, so they're missing the grief part. So, if I ever sponsor people again, I'm gonna have a grief inventory. Let's look at the losses in your life,
I
man.
I
Can
think
can you be with the loss?
I think that would be huge because that's something that I've struggled with in sobriety. Like my story with grief and sobriety is kind of interesting. Like I got sober because of a relapse with my grandmother,
Uh-huh.
right? And that was it wasn't my worst bottom by any means, like
Yeah.
on paper, but something like that window of willingness opened up
Yeah.
enough where I'm like, I hurt this woman who has been nothing but good
Yeah.
to me,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
And I
Wow.
woke up and I didn't know what had happened, like I complete blackout. And I get sober, come out here, do the whole sobriety journey, and then like 3 weeks before I get a year sober, she dies.
Oh, man.
Which was a trip. She never got to see me sober, truly sober. We conversated a lot and we talked a lot. But I was a part of Pacific Group, which, they do the watch party thing,
Mhm.
right? I don't know if you're familiar with what that is. Before you get a year sober, the night before, everybody goes to a diner and you wear suits and they sing you happy birthday when the clock
Oh,
strikes
okay.
midnight and everybody gives you
Wow.
like a
Oh,
birthday
that's a
card.
cool
It's
ritual.
a cool thing for people who are
Yeah, sure.
newly sober.
Yeah.
But I had this watch party planned and we find out that the funeral is going to be on the day of the watch party.
Oh, wow.
So I fly to North Carolina,
Yeah.
and as you know, in Jewish tradition, I physically bury my
Yeah.
grandmother. I'm the last one at the gravesite, putting the dirt on.
Yeah.
And we leave, and I get on a plane, and I'm coming back to LA to go have this experience of
Yeah.
celebrating a year of sobriety.
Yeah. Wow.
And because I didn't have tools for grieving. I
Yeah.
had tools for suiting up and showing up and being a
Sure.
different person for my
Sure.
family.
Yeah.
I feel like it's a grief I still haven't processed.
Uh-huh.
Like
Yeah.
I remember one thing that substances allowed me to do was to connect with my emotions.
Yeah,
And
yeah, sure.
sometimes it was an outpouring, like, an
Of
overreaction,
course.
crying and
Yeah, yeah.
screaming.
Yeah.
But I noticed when she passed, I didn't cry
Mhm.
like I used to.
Yeah.
And I still haven't,
Mhm.
had a good cry over it,
Yeah.
which it's interesting. A grief inventory would be good for something like
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the was a touching story, number
Mm,
1. You made me think about, sitting Shiva.
mm,
The ritual in the Jewish tradition is that when somebody dies that's close to you, depending on their level of closeness, you, stay indoors,
mhm,
for 7 days, right? And you grieve for 30, and then you say Kaddish for a year if it's like a parent or a kid or something like that,
mhm,
depending on how close they are. And so they have these really beautiful grieving rituals.
mhm.
Actually, I think it's one of the most beautiful things about the Jewish
Yeah.
tradition is the grieving rituals. But, the other thing that you're saying, emotions have a life of their own.
Mhm,
And it's on the one hand, that's very challenging for the human ego. It's like I wanna grieve, but I'm not grieving. I wanna be
mhm.
sad, but I'm not sad. I wanna be happy, but I'm not happy, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I wanna be real, but I'm not being real,
Mhm. Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah.
this is just, this is the human condition, but I would say that the beauty of, the experience of being a human being is that emotions do not work on command.
Mm.
They don't work on inventory either. You can do a four-step and not feel anything. You know that, I know that.
I've seen that happen with
Many
sponsees.
times,
Yeah, yeah,
many
yeah,
times. Maybe more than people actually feel something. Same
yeah.
thing with the ninth step. Feelings, we're not in charge of them. And I just think that's beautiful, man, right? Imagine being in charge of your own laughter. How terrible would that be, right? If
Be
you
a
had to
nightmare.
choose
Yeah.
whether you're gonna laugh or
Yeah.
not, right? Exactly right,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
You got it. You're like, "Oh, got it," and then I
Mhm,
just laugh.
mhm.
You know what I mean? And so, you know, you might have an experience of grieving your grandmother 25 years from now
Mhm.
in a way that you never predicted, you know? You might have an experience. I had an experience the other day. It was deep, and it was of a kid I robbed when I was in high school. I broke into his house. I stole his music equipment, and, uh and I made an amends to him, you know what I mean? Like, when I got sober, I made an amends. I was paying him $200 a month. Then I made a living amends to him. I counseled his brother for a year when
Mhm.
he got sober because his brother God put his brother in my life, so I got to make a living
Yeah.
amends. I was like, "Okay, cool, I did my amends." You know what I mean? Paid it off, did the brother, did the living amends, and I did the money amends, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
And I was sitting in my car. I'm 44, man. This was fucking 30 years ago. And I realized I impacted this kid's life. Like, he was pursuing a musical dream. I stole his musical equipment. He couldn't continue to pursue music in the way that he had before, and I, like, affected his trajectory. I literally just I don't even remember what made me think about it. I was just sitting in my car and I thought about it. I was like,
There's no rhyme or reason, like, nothing triggered it?
and a deep sense of remorse came up.
Mhm.
Now I had made an amends, but I had not experienced remorse.
Mm.
You know what I'm saying? Like that.
I
You see what I'm
I
saying?
I can think of so many experiences that I've had in sobriety just like that.
Yeah.
There was a situation where I had a buddy overdose. I was a DJ at one point in my life, and, he overdosed at a show I was playing,
Yeah.
and the best tools I had to get through that funeral were to show up drunk, act a fool, and that was how I was grieving, right?
Mhm.
I couldn't just be there and be
Yeah.
present, and I was drinking and doing cocaine through it. It was a nightmare, and I deeply hurt his family by
Uh-huh.
doing that.
Yeah, yeah.
And, I remember same thing, one day I'm driving and I see a billboard for a realtor, and his
Yeah.
sister's a realtor,
Yeah.
and she had messaged me after this and said, "You really hurt me
Yeah.
when you showed up and
Wow.
you were drunk and you told me you were the last one to see him alive." And it affected me. I was still in addiction, and it was when I was trying and fighting to get sober.
Yeah.
And, you know, we had decided that since I had already made kind of an amends when I was using, that we
Yeah.
didn't need to re-traumatize them, bring it up and
Yeah.
with me and my sponsor. And one day I'm just driving and like you said, look over, realtor on a billboard. I'm like, connect to his sister.
Yeah.
Shame, remorse, guilt
Yeah.
pops up.
Yeah.
And it's like, what do you do with that?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Feel it.
Yeah, well, feel it was a big part of it, and of
Yeah.
course, I
Yeah.
call my sponsor, and I'm like, he's like, "No, this doesn't mean that you get to go make yourself feel better about
Yeah.
this," which is interesting, right? I
Oh,
just had to
interesting. You know,
sit with it,
it makes
you
you
know?
feel better about it. That's an interesting comment. I have to think about that for a little bit. And so he had a concern that you wanted to discharge your guilt by doing something?
That's
Was
exactly
that
what I
his
wanted to
concern?
do.
That
I
was
was
his
like, "I
concern.
need to go make an amends for this. I didn't properly make an amends." He's like,
Yeah.
"No, no, no, that's more about you than it is for them."
That interesting question. How did he know that?
I think because how activated I got, it was like I was sitting with this feeling that I wanted to put onto somebody else,
Yeah,
right?
I would say that's a bit of an overstep. No, not that I don't overstep, I do,
Yeah.
but potentially, like, because another possible perspective is, you know, that there's such a thing as a higher power that is creating superordinate orders in the world in ways that we don't
Mhm.
fully see or aware of. And an interesting comment might have been to say, "Oh, that's pretty deep, man.
Mhm.
You seem activated right now, you know, but maybe you want to do some writing on what you feel like doing and see if that, you know, you feel called to do that when you're a little less activated because
Mhm.
maybe there's something here happening in reality that neither you or I are fully aware of."
Yeah.
Right? Because sometimes you pick up that phone and call, whether it's, you know, out of guilt or whatever it is, and the person says, "Oh my God, I was just thinking about him."
Mm. Yeah, and the
Right?
synchronicity starts to line up, which
I mean, if
is
you
yeah.
say, if you know, is there a higher power? Is there not a higher power?
Hmm.
You know, do we know God's will? No, no, of course not. But do we try to attune to it? You know, and as sponsors or guides or therapists or counselors or friends, you know, you have to be very mindful.
Mhm.
That's why I sound like messing with people's lives.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think asking somebody to pause is very reasonable,
That's true.
you know?
And that's something I struggle with in, sponsoring other guys is when is it my will and when is it God's will, you know?
There's a, yeah.
And the best way, I mean, you
Yeah.
kind of said it there is what if you call and they're like, oh, I was just thinking about him. It's the synchronicities is when I know that I'm a little bit closer, or I'm attuned to God's will rather than my
Yeah.
own will.
And it's interesting, I was teaching about the superego yesterday, and I was making a distinction between the superego and the conscience,
Hmm.
you know? And the superego is an internal authority,
Mm.
right? That tells us whether we're doing enough or not. It just tells us when we're not doing enough, really, and whether we're doing the right thing or not. And neurotic guilt, that kind of guilt, like, oh my God, I can't, right? That comes out of the superego,
Hmm.
right? And that the superego is implanted in you by your parents and by human society so that you can function in society, right? It's the law.
Mm.
They call it the name of the father in Freudian and Lacanian terms, right? You have to be inducted into your social environment, and you have to interject inside of you the law so you know how to behave
Mm.
in society. So you have an internal police and an internal coach, right? That's why people drink, by the way.
Yeah.
Shut that motherfucker down
Yeah.
because
Yeah. I
it's
don't
too
want to hear
abusive,
that shit. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Okay. That's also why a lot of people get sober.
Mm.
The super ego says, you got to get your fucking shit together, right? And I'm saying, okay, there's this super ego, okay? And it's based in the past. It's based in history. It's a pattern. It's not creative, and it's not friendly. And it's not kind. Sometimes it tells the truth. You should get your shit together, okay? But sometimes it lies.
Mm.
And it says, you've been in treatment for 5 days, and it's time for you to get a job.
Yeah. Oh,
Sometimes
I know that. Yeah.
sometimes it
Yeah.
lies, but
Hmm.
it's not the conscience,
Hmm.
right? And so to me, you could see a billboard, you well up, and you have an experience of remorse. That's the experience of the conscience.
Mm.
That's why that was meaningful for you. It's why you remember it.
Mm.
It wasn't just some experience of guilt. I'm sure you've had many thoughts of guilt all the time.
That just fade away. Yeah.
There was something that came up in you, and it was real, and it was full. I'm just guessing, right? And it was there, and it was something. Something happened,
Mm.
right? You became aware, connected to something. Something came up. Now, then often the superego turns on. Right, so it is tricky. Superego says, "You need to do something about this. You gotta do this, or you should feel bad about it," right? Superego can come on, can turn on after that, right? But that doesn't mean that that moment of conscience wasn't real,
Mm.
and it doesn't mean that you should or shouldn't do that, right? I
Mm.
mean, those are choices. Like, one thing I had that came up for me in a meditation a month ago that I thought was pretty like, "Oh, man," evil or bad things, destructive things, um, we are tempted to do them. It's coercive.
Mm.
Right? You're coerced. It's like there's something pulling
The
you
cunning, baffling
to
power.
do
Yeah.
to relapse, to cheat, whatever. The good is never coerced. You just have to choose it. Like, if you're trying to figure out how to do the good thing, the right
It
thing,
doesn't pull
you
you.
can't wait
Yeah.
for a sign. I mean, there might be a sign, but the good is not coercive.
Mm.
The good is like, hey, it's a step if you want to take it. Very different than the dark,
Which is
you know?
interesting. Yeah. So what you're kind of saying is it's almost like the angel and devil on the shoulder, right? And that came to you in a meditation.
Well, angel and devil, I don't know if I would use that metaphor. What I'm saying is, we have impulses. We're egocentric. We're hungry. We're sexual.
Mm.
We can be violent at times. And the pull towards those is strong. Somebody cuts me off in traffic. For me, the pull towards "fuck you," right, can be
Yeah.
strong. The pull towards a sexual act, that isn't above board can be strong. Gluttony,
Mm.
like, right? The pull
Yeah.
for these things can be very strong. Money, greed. Everyone wants to make money, be famous. I want to be more important than
Mhm.
you. There's a strong coercive element to that's pulling you in,
Mm.
both inside, outside, however you want to think about that. Okay, the good is not like that.
Yeah, it's true.
The good is like, okay. Now there is grace. I'm not saying grace never occurs. I think everybody's paid attention, has experienced some grace in their life. So that is an element. But ultimately the good is something you have to just choose.
Yeah. So you just jump in. You don't get the same. I don't know. Whenever I was pulled to bad things, there was almost like a high that came with it, right?
100%.
And then the good was not
The good is
not that
a choice you
experience.
make, and you have an experience, and it feels good. Now, there are good experiences that we have in there, experiences that come to us that are good. But ultimately, like I would say to somebody who's in a conflict between doing something that they know to be good and something that they know to be bad, and let's say they're stuck doing something bad over and over again, a lot of the time mentally, you're waiting to figure something out or something to happen that forces you to do the good
Hmm.
or that pulls you into the good.
Hmm.
And so that's an interesting trick.
Yeah.
Actually, you just got to kind of step into the good. Like you have to do it.
Yeah, it's kind of like the nudge from a judge or the nudge from family, right? Like they
Well,
can
other
push
people
me
step in.
towards it.
Yeah, of
Yeah,
course. Other
yeah, for
people step
sure.
in.
The
Yeah.
intervention piece.
Yeah, man.
Well, we're running out of time. We talked a little bit about Recover Integrity. I would love
Uh-huh.
for you to talk a little bit about Antedote
Oh,
because I
yeah,
think
cool,
with
man.
it being a treatment alternative and almost like a pre-treatment intervention for people who are going
Sure.
down that path, I would love for you to speak a little bit about how you think Antedote fits into the treatment space, what inspired you to start Antedote.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of people use the term holistic
Hmm.
in treatment. It's a tricky word, in my opinion. And antidotes for young men with mental health or substance abuse issues are some of our guys are neurodivergent as
Hmm.
well, and they don't fit into an easy category or box, or treatment just doesn't feel like the right fit for them, either for them or for their families or, whatever it might be. And, there aren't really rites of passage for young men in our society.
Hmm.
And we have used the clinical space, like treatment, as a means to deal with young men that get stuck. And for me, there was something unfortunate about that, and sometimes something that wasn't so effective about that. And so I was wanting to create an environment where the center of what was happening was not clinical.
Mm.
The center of what was happening was your life, and it was relational, and the clinical was adjunctive. And so I was moving the clinical out of the center of treatment, which I just thought was silly, to be honest with you, for a
Mm.
variety of reasons a lot of the time, and putting life, relationship, responsibility, effort, fun, joy, play, creativity, challenge, meaning at the center of this community.
Hmm.
And then if, fine, you have bipolar, you have to see a psychiatrist, or, you need TMS, or,
Yeah, outside
you need a
issues.
family
Yeah.
therapist, like, great,
Hmm.
like, great. But it's not the core. The core is your life.
Hmm.
And so how do we design a program that is, giving people the opportunity to live life,
Yeah.
while having enough structure, enough containment, enough love, enough care that they're healing
Hmm.
while they're living their lives.
Yeah.
That was sort of the goal. Now that's very abstract.
Hmm.
It's a coaching model,
Hmm.
with staff that has a lot of experience working in recovery and mental health. It's much less group work. So we're doing 2 hours a day of group work, and then a lot of life skills, not a lot of life living
Hmm.
is what's happening for a much cheaper cost than treatment, which was one of the other ultimate goals was how do we make this affordable for people who don't have to pay, $200,000 to get clean or whatever.
Yeah, yeah. I remember when the first time I went over there and checked it out and kind of heard what you guys were doing, the first thought I had was I went to my first lockdown treatment program when I was 16 and my first inpatient when I was 18. I didn't give a shit about the clinical.
Yeah, yeah,
That was like my ears were off when I
yeah,
was in those sessions and I was just
yeah,
bullshitting the therapist. I wasn't prepared to have a clinical experience.
yeah,
And so for a young male who struggled with being vulnerable, was like a lifelong chameleon. I didn't know who I was. My
sure.
identity was all fucked up. I think like if there was something like that, could have
Yeah.
changed my whole life. It's like an early intervention too, because I spent the next 10 years of my life going in and out of
Yeah.
treatment programs. And it wasn't really until I started to figure out who I was and who I wanted to
Yeah.
be.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I try to think about, I try not to be so, mm, mechanistic
Hmm.
in my thinking, so like, let's say somebody's coming to Antidote. Can we provide an experience for somebody, regardless of outcome, that is of value to them?
Hmm.
Because we're very outcome oriented.
Yeah.
I was like, well, can I provide? Well, but we know we can't guarantee an outcome. I mean, I'm sorry. Somebody comes to treatment, you go to therapy, you train with a basketball coach. There's not an outcome guaranteed.
Hmm.
That's just life. You do your best. But I think a nice guiding light is, can we make the experience itself valuable? And then if you make the experience itself valuable, meaning good,
Hmm.
can we create good experiences together as a community? I mean, that's all I'm trying to do. Whether
Yeah.
I'm running a group or I'm at Antidote or I'm designing a program, can we make this good? Because I feel like if we make it good, there's a high likelihood that there's going to be a better outcome. But even if there's not, at least we made it good.
Yeah.
You know what I'm
Or
saying?
you planted a seed that might get
At
watered
least we
down the
made it
road.
good, man.
Yeah.
Everything is temporary.
Yeah,
At least
for sure.
At least we made it good. I had the coolest experience. I lean on the guilt side of the spectrum as opposed to the, the blame side of the spectrum. I had a really cool experience recently. Just a couple weeks ago, I was running a group. And, I'm always looking for like a feeling, man. Like I want to connect in group. I want let's get, like I said, I'm looking for the good together. Like let's get it together. Let's talk about art. Let's talk about philosophy. Let's talk
Let's
about
make it an
psychology. Let's talk about
experience.
wounds.
Yeah.
Let's cry. Let's yell. Let's get angry. Like let's get it, man. And sometimes it feels stiff. You know what I mean? And normally when a group feels stiff, I walk away and I'm like, yeah, you move too fast, Sean.
Yeah.
And
It
like
becomes like an internal thing.
there
Yeah.
wasn't enough containment. You didn't care enough. You had too much transference. All of that, which might be true. But I finished this group. Maybe it was last week. And I said, you motherfuckers suck today. And I thought it was a great win.
Yeah.
Because I put all the responsibility on myself to run a group. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. There's fucking 12 of us here.
Yeah.
And this was the RIs. It was all the grown-ups.
Yeah,
I said, I expect you guys to do better next week.
Yeah, that's good.
You know what I'm saying?
That's like what I wish I could say because
Because that's the growth for them.
Yeah,
like
for sure.
ultimately, it's not a fucking performance. So ultimately, if I want them to grow and I'm putting it on me, what the group feels like, no, man, I'm just part of the group.
And we don't have that much power.
I have some. I'm a facilitator, so I have more than you, but I don't have it all.
Yeah, I can't make all of you give a shit.
So I was like, this is, and I decided that's my new thing from now on. If I don't like how the group feels, but the real thing would be to go, I think we can do better next time.
Yeah.
But mainly you guys.
Yeah, mainly you. I'm doing good.
Yeah,
but I love that because I remember sitting in group at RI, and I'm like, and even as a client, sometimes there's clients who are more bought in than other clients, and when you have this ecosystem of everybody's existing and playing their own part, there's always like the absentee, who's not fully checked in, and then there's the one who's the overachiever, which is why they called me Johnny Sobriety when I was there. That I hated, and I hated it. But it's like I would see other people, and I would see you getting passionate or a different facilitator getting passionate. I'm like, you motherfuckers, like, come on, this guy's trying. Like, it takes all of us. It's this herd mentality. But sometimes that's what it takes is another client, not a facilitator, to pull somebody in.
Like I just think the other thing with the Young Men's program is we've really started treating, people with kid gloves in a way that doesn't respect their agency, doesn't respect them as moral agents, as having the capacity to be resilient, as having the capacity to have feelings and survive them, so the older I get, the more me I try to, show up and bring. And the more that, I'm reminded like human beings being authentic with other human beings and spaces of authenticity and healing with the goal to come together and be caring and grow, learn, and change, it's going to work out. You just let it go, Yeah.
It's like a hands off the wheel approach a little bit, or
just, and not, leading more with your heart and your gut and less with your head. With your heart. Like, I know a lot of shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I know I could talk a cat off a, I can sell an Eskimo ice high. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I know a lot of shit, but so the fuck what? And so this work for me is like, I know, that's fine. Can I be with you? Even this, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Can I be with you? Like, that's for me is what it's about. And then in learning how to be with you, are you learning how to be? Are you learning how to be with me? Oh, cool, man. Can we translate that to, other arenas of our life? To be with your parents?
Yeah.
Can you learn to be with somebody that you love? Can you learn to be in the world, like belong in the world,
And that's something that has been deeply instilled in me from going to RI was, can I just be? Can I be present with you?
Yeah.
That's something that the clinical approach doesn't always address, It's just how to exist in the world,
I have such a reverence for psychology and what it brings to the table, and such a disdain for when it becomes ideology. Any of it, even the stuff that seems very good and very friendly and very nice, and it's like I just disdain ideology. I don't like deadness. Maybe I like it when I'm dead.
Yeah.
But as an alive person, I don't like ideology, so I don't like when people have slogans. I don't like when people, like I don't trust. Could be right, could not be right. Where's it coming from? You know, so
Questioning.
there are big critiques
Mhm.
of what has happened in the field of psychology and psychoanalysis.
Mhm.
Major critiques,
Mhm.
huge, absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, and I struggle with this sometimes too, is just being rigid in a belief pattern, which doesn't leave
Mhm,
anything open to interpretation,
mhm,
you know, because everybody can
100%,
have a different experience with different things, right?
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, rigidity, man. It's an interesting. I was gonna write a book called Rigid.
You were?
Yeah, yeah, I'm still thinking about it.
You
Honestly,
should.
I got too many damn projects. So.
Well, I wanna hear the screenplay. We used
I
to
got
talk about
several of
that.
those. I
Yeah.
got music. I'm
Yeah.
always,
That's one thing I love about you is you're one of the busiest guys I know. You have 2 treatment programs, but you still make time to have fun and be creative.
I'm a very
Like,
selfish person, bro. I like to do what I like to do.
well, you could first thing in the morning coming in, hearing you playing some music and what was it, Paul Simon that you used to play?
I've played Paul Simon before.
Yeah,
Yes, I have.
you like
Obvious
this
Child,
Africa
maybe
album
Obvious
that you were showing
Child,
me and,
or
you
yeah,
know?
Graceland. Oh
But
yeah.
that was attractive to me when I was in your program because most people don't show that side of them to
Yeah,
their
you got to bring in
clients.
the art. You have to bring in the music. You have to bring in life,
Mhm.
dancing. Writing. Like these are beautiful aspects of being human,
Mhm.
and they don't need to be separated out.
Yeah.
I mean, who wants to just live?
Well, it's like
You gotta live.
for sure. Well, it's also like the AA slogan of like finding somebody who has something that you want. And it
Mhm.
was very clear to me when I came to Recover Integrity that you and Adam and really everybody who worked there
Mhm.
had something that I wanted,
Yeah.
where you guys had fun and you were like a family and you had love. It
Mhm.
wasn't just this like fiduciary responsibility to your client. It wasn't that at all. It was like, we want you to be better and we're going to be ourselves throughout this
Oh, that's
process,
really cool, man. I
where
appreciate
you guys are in the group with us airing
it.
grievances,
Mhm.
which is that's a trip
Mhm.
for
Mhm.
somebody who's leading a program to say, hey, look, I have this grievance with
Mhm.
you, or let
Mhm.
me give you well, it's not elevation. What was it called
Mhm.
in community group, where gratitude, where you're
Mhm.
giving gratitude to your
Gratitude.
clients,
Yes, yes,
which
yes.
was a beautiful thing to see. Shai, so you talk about the relationship between 12 step and IFS. Can you expand upon that a little bit?
Yeah, I can. So if you think about the 12-step program and what is one of the sort of underlying dichotomies um, in 12-step culture, and that it's sort of like underneath, implicit in the literature, is between God's will and self-will.
Mm,
So I say there's sort of two states that a person can be in that 12-step is interested in. One of them is a concern about when you're in self-will, and one of them is a goal or an
hmm
intention, which is to try to live in God's will. And if you think about how those states are described, self-will is a rigid, narrow, um, overly assertive state,
hmm
maybe fueled by anger, right? That's what self-will is, like the dry drunk
hmm
stuck in self-will. If you picture that, dry is another good word. What is God's will? Oh, God's will sounds free. It sounds open. It sounds creative. It sounds relaxed, right? Which, if you map that onto IFS, they have a term called self energy,
mm,
which is one of the, I don't want to call it goal states, but an observer state that is curious, playful, caring, etc. And so, you can ask the difference. What's the difference between the state of enjoying God's will and self energy? I would say almost nothing,
hmm
right? And protective parts, which are a big part of the IFS framework. What's the difference between protective parts and self will? Well, you'd say, well, not much. There's different types of protector parts, but they would probably all in 12 step fall under the heading of what we would call self-will.
hmm
They call it agenda driven, right? So one of the ways that you can tell a part from self is a part has an agenda. What is self-will? Self-will means I have an agenda for the self. It's an egocentric state.
mm,
So it actually maps on perfectly. They're kind of talking about the same thing, but one of them, the goal state is external.
mm,
God's will is something that I connect to that's not just in me. Whereas in IFS is a psychology. So all of this allegedly is living in your psyche, right?
mm,
Right, which has its ups and we could argue
yeah.
about, that. But that's sort of the mapping on of those 2.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
And then did you guys have another one? We
I
wanted
had
to do? That was
one.
good.
I'm thinking about how to frame it as a question, which I think is also around God's will and self-will, or we could map the kind of Buddhist cosmology onto that. So
Okay.
you could say, and does how does Buddhism fit in there, which is a popular
Yeah. How does Buddhism?
recovery path for a lot of people as
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
something like
Okay.
that.
So Buddhism's let me restart. So Buddhism is a popular path for a lot of people to recovery. How does that fit into God's will and self will?
Yeah, so again, I think it's a similar, pattern that people are picking up on in humans. So one of the deep concerns of Buddhism is desire.
Mm,
And like one of the core tenets is life is suffering. And I think it's actually like life is dislocated. Like life is like a hip out of its socket.
mm,
Like I told you, I'm always in pain.
yeah.
You know what I mean? And so Buddhism identifies the suffering with desire, like the desiring self.
Mm,
And so the practice of Buddhism is a practice of non-attachment to find yourself to higher levels of awakened awareness, not attached to what? Well, this desiring self. What is the desiring self? Oh, so that sounds a lot like self-will to
yeah.
me. You know what I mean? Oh, that sounds kind of like a lot like some of the protector parts that they're talking about in IFS and all of the ways that they've learned how to cope.
hmm
And so you see, actually, these are all various maps that are describing various human experiences. I'm not a perennialist. I'm not saying they're exactly the same. I'm just saying they are pointing at the same patterns.
Mm. Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, Shai, when I was doing my coin out at Recover Integrity, you said something with me that has stuck with me throughout my entire sobriety. And it's something I try to pass on to other clients that I work with over at Refine Recovery. And you looked at me in the eyes during the coin out. And what you pressed into my coin was, John, we know people are ready to leave when they're willing to
Oh,
stay.
yeah, yeah.
What do you think are some other indicators, if any, that somebody is ready to leave and go to that next step where they're taking their treatment experience out into the real world?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I said in the interview is one of the ways that we stabilize is through blaming,
Mm,
right? We find an enemy.
yeah.
So I know if I'm in, if my environment that I'm related to in treatment, whether that's my parents, my spouse, a friendship group, the treatment program itself, if I'm finding myself in an antagonistic relationship to my environment, then I'm probably not ready to go.
Yeah.
Right now, there are, of course, exceptions to that and things like that. But in general, in recovery culture, you're looking at a notion of surrender.
Mm,
And the notion of surrender has something to do with not fighting. Not fighting whom, right? So a lot of the time you'll be coming in treatment, you might be in a rush.
mhm,
And so this you're ready to go when you're willing to stay idea has to do with I've let go of the agenda I had when I got into treatment.
mm,
And I now see the bigger picture. Right, and I actually see that my goals of being happy, healthy, and successful or, whatever my goals are pretty aligned with the people that love me. For
mhm,
whatever issues these people might have and what other sub-agendas they might have, probably if they love me, they want good for me, and I want good for myself. So there shouldn't be a core antagonism there. If I'm in a decent treatment program or sober living or I'm a decent therapist or whatever it is, there shouldn't be a strong antagonism between their perspective and my perspective. Again, there are exceptions to that. Obviously, those ideas could be abused
mhm.
in, corrupt systems. But in general, that's kind of what I meant by that.
Okay. Yeah.
The openness,
Yeah, the surrender, the final surrender.
the surrender and the openness.
Mhm,
Now, I know we're going a little longer, but you were in an interesting situation when I met you,
mhm.
which is kind of funny,
Yeah.
where you were an exception. You felt you were in an environment, this was before you moved into
Mhm.
Recover
Yeah.
Integrity, that didn't feel right for your soul and you felt it was harming you in ways that wouldn't be necessary in order for you to recover,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So, interesting. Do I ask you to surrender there? How seriously do I take, right?
Mhm.
Okay, so I said there are exceptions. And, that is something that one has to figure out in each particular situation. I was unsure whether encouraging you to leave that system was the right thing to do or not.
Mhm.
And so we kept talking about it
Yeah.
and we kept processing it. And ultimately I said, hey, this is your choice. I can support it. You have to make the choice.
Mhm.
Here's what I know. Here's what I see. And you did the same thing. And, so far, John, it seems like you made the right choice. I mean, I have to say,
Yeah.
I was thinking about that on the way over here.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure it was going to be the right choice. Were you trying to get out of something that you needed,
Mhm.
right? Or was this actually something harmful? And I think the jury's almost out on that. I mean, I
Mhm.
don't know how many years somebody has to stay sober before we say you were right, but
Yeah.
I think you're probably right. I mean,
Yeah.
I would vote on that side. What do you think?
I think that two things can be true. Was I was trying to get out of something that I could have benefited from, but also it was causing me
It's
pain.
got you hurt.
And I think that coming to an environment where I was able to be vulnerable and I felt safe was big for me, and that was the main thing. And I'm still very close with that other program.
Of course, me too.
I sent my own brother there,
Yeah. Oh, that's cool.
So I see the value in
Yeah.
every type of program. But I think at that point in my life, I needed a softer touch
Yeah.
because, as you said, you had to teach me how to be angry,
Yeah. Yeah. Sure. That's
and
exactly right.
I didn't know how to be angry.
Yeah.
So having somebody coach me through that whole process, and anger, vulnerability, like all of the things that I didn't have the ability to express. I don't think at that other program, or really any other program than RI, I would have
Sure.
been able to bring those parts online in a healthy way.
Okay, a 2-minute teaching, and then I'm good.
One more?
Yeah, I've done this one before, but I actually really like it. It's from a guy named Franz Rosenzweig,
Okay.
and he's talking about God's will and what God's will is.
Mm-hmm.
And he says God's will is never a rule. Now,
Mm-hmm.
God's will could line up with a rule,
Mm-hmm.
but he's saying it's never a rule. So God's will is never something you can enforce over and over and over again. He says, because God's will is always unique and particular to the living moment.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't have a rule. And he says God's will is never abstract. It's never just some idea that you follow over. And he goes, no, it's something particular that's happening in the moment that you are called to do or not to do.
Mm.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? Because it's never a rule and it's not abstract. And he says, and God's will is God asking you to do God's will, never more and never less.
Hmm.
Now, that's the one that messed me up.
Yeah.
Because I was like, well, never less I get. But what do you mean never more?
I can't do more than God's will? Yeah.
So, you're called to give the homeless guy $1, and you say, oh, well, I might as well give him $3.
Mm.
And Franz Rosenzweig says, no, that's not correct. That's not God's will. That's your will.
Mm.
That's your will. That's not God's will. God asked you to give $1. He didn't ask to give you 3. Where's the 3 coming from? He says, it's not your will. Right? And if you trust God's will, then you do what God asks of you. Never more, never less.
That makes a ton of sense.
I love
that's
it,
a
man.
trip. Yeah,
I
that's
really love
awesome.
it, man. I
Yeah.
was just like, whoa,
Yeah.
man, because I'm the more guy.
Yeah, me too.
Oh, this is a good thing. Let
I
me
wanna
do
prove
more.
myself. Yeah,
That's my stuff.
That's a trip. I like that one.
Yeah. All right.
We're running out of time. I appreciate you coming on,
Man,
Yeshaia.
I
This
appreciate all
is
the kind words, and it's nice to hear, your perspective both on life and recovery and, time we shared together, man. So I
Yeah.
appreciate you, bro.
Yeah. Do you want to plug real quick your Instagram, Antedote, Recover
Yeah,
Integrity?
I have an Instagram. I think it's Yeshaia Blakeney _. I think it's at Yeshaia Blakeney _
Mhm.
Could be the opposite.
Okay.
Could be underscore. At
We'll
Yeshaia
put it underneath the
Okay,
text. Yeah,
cool.
we got you.
And then 2 trustworthy, very good programs that I'm a part of in Los Angeles. Antedote at antidotelab.com for young men. We have both adolescent and young adult men. We have housing and we have an outpatient lab. Please check out that website, and then recoverintegrity.com, which is a dual diagnosis men's program in West Los Angeles. Been around about 11 years.
Oh yeah, man.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, I'll vouch for both these programs. They're great. All their staff's amazing. They change young men's lives. Thank you again, Yeshaia, for coming on.
This was really
Yeah.
a lot of fun, man.
Oh yeah, man. Thank you. This podcast is brought to you by Refine Recovery. If you're struggling, whether it's mental health, substance abuse, give us a call. We can definitely help you out. Give me a ring at the number below, and you can talk to me personally, and we'll get you some help.